In our society, we've been conditioned to look outside ourselves for the love we believe we lack within. But here's the truth: love is not something we find or seek, it is something we nurture from within. When we search for love in all the wrong places, when we look for external validation to tell us that we matter, we end up overlooking the one truth that could set us free: we are enough, exactly as we are. We live in a world that often tells us we're not enough. Whether it's through social media comparisons, cultural expectations, or even well-meaning comments from friends and family, the message we often receive is that there's something missing within us. This can create an insatiable desire to search outside ourselves for something that will make us feel worthy, loved, and accepted. But the truth is, the journey to love, connection, and fulfillment begins when we stop looking outward and start looking inward. It starts with embracing our own worth. Understanding our worth is not something that happens overnight. It's not a quick fix or a fleeting moment of self-realization. It's a process, a journey of uncovering the truth of who we are. But this journey is crucial because the foundation of all healthy relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, begins with a healthy relationship with ourselves. We cannot give or receive love authentically if we don't first understand and accept our own worth. Many of us are taught from a young age to seek external validation. We are conditioned to believe that love, affection, and acceptance are something to be earned or awarded by others. From our childhood, we are often measured by achievements, grades, and how well we fit into the expectations of those around us. We strive for approval, hoping that once we meet someone's standards, we will feel whole. We chase after the approval of others, thinking that it will fill the emptiness inside. But what if we stop chasing and simply recognize that we are worthy as we are without needing anyone else's permission? The first step in embracing your worth is letting go of the need for validation. When we rely on others to tell us our value, we give them the power to define us. And often the standards others set for us are arbitrary or based on their own insecurities and perceptions. What does it mean to live a life where your worth is constantly dependent on someone else's opinion? It means that you are never truly free. You are always at the mercy of other people's judgments. The key to finding peace and fulfillment lies in recognizing that your worth is not tied to anyone's opinion but is inherent in your being. This is not to say that we should abandon relationships or the need for connection. Human beings are naturally wired for connection, and we need others in our lives. But it's essential that we don't allow our sense of self-worth to be built upon the opinions or treatment of others. Healthy relationships are rooted in mutual respect, trust, and shared understanding. They thrive when each person brings their own sense of self-worth to the table. You cannot give from an empty cup, and if you don't believe you are worthy, you'll struggle to believe that others see your worth too. One of the most powerful practices in learning to embrace your worth is learning to stop apologizing for your existence. How often do we apologize for taking up space, for being ourselves, for asserting our needs and desires? This stems from a belief that we are a burden or that our needs don't matter as much as those of others. But in truth, we all deserve to take up space. We all deserve to be seen, heard, and valued. When we stop apologizing for being who we are, we begin to reclaim our power. We begin to recognize that we are worthy simply because we exist, and we do not need to apologize for that. Another key aspect of embracing your worth is learning to set boundaries. Boundaries are a powerful form of self-respect. They communicate to the world that you value yourself enough to protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being. Boundaries are not selfish, they are an essential part of maintaining healthy relationships. When you honor your boundaries, you are telling yourself that you are worthy of respect, kindness, and care. And when you set boundaries in relationships, you are teaching others to treat you in the way that you deserve. But embracing your worth doesn't mean becoming arrogant or self-centered. It's not about believing you are superior to others, it's about recognizing that you, just like every other human being, are deserving of love, respect, and kindness. True self-worth comes from a place of humility and self-compassion, not from comparing ourselves to others or seeking to elevate ourselves above them. When we embrace our own worth, we naturally begin to see the worth in others as well. We stop looking for reasons to compete, and we start creating spaces where people can feel accepted, valued, and loved for who they truly are. Another important aspect of embracing your worth is releasing the need for perfection. So many of us are caught in the trap of striving for perfection, thinking that once we are perfect, we will finally be worthy of love and success. But perfection is a myth. It's an unattainable ideal that only causes pain and frustration. No one is perfect. We all have flaws, mistakes, and scars. But it's precisely these imperfections that make us human, relatable, and capable of deep connection. Embracing your worth means accepting yourself as you are, imperfections and all. It's about recognizing that your flaws are part of your unique beauty, and they do not diminish your value in any way. One of the most freeing aspects of embracing your worth is realizing that you are enough just as you are right now. You don't need to become someone else, achieve more, or prove anything to anyone. Your worth is not contingent upon your accomplishments, your looks, or the opinions of others. You are worthy simply because you exist. This realization can be incredibly liberating. It means you no longer have to chase after approval or seek external validation. You can stand firm in your own value and trust that you are enough. Embracing your worth is a radical act of self-love. It's about stepping into your power, recognizing your inherent value, and living your life with the confidence that comes from knowing you are worthy of everything good the world has to offer. When you embrace your worth, you stop looking for love to fill a void, and instead you begin to create and nurture relationships that reflect the love and respect you already have for yourself. It's only when you understand and embrace your worth that you can truly experience the depth of love and connection that life has to offer. In conclusion, the journey to love starts with you. It starts with embracing your worth, accepting yourself, and letting go of the need for external validation. When you recognize your own value, you open yourself up to healthier, more authentic relationships. You stop looking for love to complete you, and instead you realize that you are already complete. You are worthy just as you are. Vulnerability is often misunderstood in our society. We're taught from a young age to hide our weaknesses, to put on a mask of perfection, and to always show the world our best selves. The concept of being vulnerable is too often linked with weakness, as though exposing our true selves would lead to rejection or failure. We have created a culture where showing vulnerability is seen as dangerous or even shameful. But in reality, vulnerability is not only a form of strength, it is the very thing that allows us to form deep, meaningful connections and to live fully in our authenticity. At its core, vulnerability is about being truly seen for who we are, with all of our imperfections, fears, and hopes. It means being open about our emotions, our struggles, and our desires. It's about showing up in the world as our authentic selves, without pretense or armor. When we embrace vulnerability, we allow others to witness our humanity, and in turn, we invite them to do the same. This exchange creates a sense of intimacy and understanding that is the foundation of true connection. Why is vulnerability often perceived as weakness? We live in a culture that celebrates strength, stoicism, and independence. The idea of showing vulnerability goes against these ideals. We fear that if we show our true selves, we will be judged, ridiculed, or rejected. We've all heard the phrase, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And while there is truth in the idea of overcoming adversity, it can also create a belief that the only way to be strong is to hide our pain and suppress our emotions. But this belief is flawed because it leads to emotional isolation and disconnection from others. In truth, vulnerability is the source of all meaningful human experiences. The capacity to be vulnerable, to open up, to be emotionally honest, and to share our true selves is what allows us to experience love, joy, and connection on a deep level. Without vulnerability, we cannot experience the fullness of life. When we hide behind walls of defense and armor, we shield ourselves not only from pain, but also from the potential beauty of connection. We cannot form genuine bonds with others if we are not willing to be vulnerable. It's in those moments of vulnerability that we truly see and understand each other. One of the most powerful aspects of vulnerability is that it allows us to be authentic. Authenticity is about being true to ourselves without pretending to be someone we're not. It's about showing up as we are, not as we think others want us to be. Vulnerability is the gateway to authenticity because it requires us to drop our masks and be real. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are giving ourselves permission to show our imperfections and flaws, and in doing so, we release the pressure to be perfect. The truth is, no one is perfect. Everyone has their struggles, their doubts, and their insecurities. When we embrace our own vulnerabilities, we open the door for others to do the same. This act of authenticity is incredibly powerful because it frees us from the chains of comparison and judgment. When we stop pretending to be someone we're not, we can begin to truly connect with others on a deeper level. We don't have to constantly worry about meeting external standards or fitting into a particular mold. Instead, we can simply be ourselves, knowing that we are worthy of love and acceptance exactly as we are. And the people who are drawn to us will be the ones who truly see us and accept us for who we are, not for who we pretend to be. Vulnerability also plays a crucial role in building trust. Trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship, whether personal or professional, but trust is not something that can be built through guardedness or secrecy. It is cultivated through openness and honesty. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are showing others that we trust them enough to reveal our true selves. This openness invites others to do the same, and through this mutual exchange, trust is formed. It's in those moments of sharing our vulnerabilities that we create the conditions for deep connection and mutual respect. However, vulnerability is not always easy. It requires courage. It takes bravery to show up and be seen, especially when there's a risk of being hurt or rejected. But vulnerability is not about being reckless or exposing ourselves to harm. It's about choosing to be open and honest despite the fear of vulnerability. It's about making the conscious decision to show up in our relationships with authenticity, even when it feels uncomfortable or risky. And the more we practice vulnerability, the stronger we become in embracing it. Over time, we learn that vulnerability is not something to be feared, but something to be celebrated. It is the gateway to deeper connections, greater emotional intimacy, and a more fulfilling life. There's also a common misconception that vulnerability means being weak or helpless. In reality, vulnerability requires great strength. It requires the ability to confront our fears, face our emotions, and embrace uncertainty. Vulnerability is the opposite of weakness. It is the ultimate act of courage. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are showing the world that we have the strength to be open, to be seen, and to share our truth without hiding behind walls. Vulnerability requires us to trust ourselves and others, to step into the unknown with the hope that the reward will be worth the risk. Moreover, vulnerability is a crucial aspect of healing. We cannot heal if we are not willing to confront our pain and let ourselves feel. Many people try to avoid their pain by numbing it or suppressing it. They build walls around their hearts and refuse to let others in. But true healing comes when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to acknowledge our pain, and to share it with others. By doing so, we allow ourselves to process our emotions and begin the journey toward healing. It's through vulnerability that we can find comfort, understanding, and support from those around us. Vulnerability also invites compassion. When we open ourselves up to others, we create space for them to do the same. We stop viewing people through a lens of judgment or comparison and begin to see them as human beings with their own struggles, hopes, and fears. Vulnerability allows us to connect on a human level, where we can offer compassion and support to one another. It fosters a sense of empathy and mutual understanding, where we can see each other's humanity and be there for one another in times of need. In conclusion, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a profound expression of strength. It is the key to authenticity, connection, trust, and healing. Vulnerability allows us to be seen, to be heard, and to form meaningful relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. It takes courage to be vulnerable, but it is through vulnerability that we experience the deepest joys, the most fulfilling relationships, and the greatest sense of belonging. Embracing vulnerability is not about being perfect, it's about being real. And when we embrace our vulnerability, we unlock the potential for true connection and transformation in our lives. Vulnerability is not a burden, it is the very thing that makes us human and allows us to live fully and authentically. In a world where social comparison is ever present, whether through social media, peer pressure, or societal expectations, it is easy to fall into the trap of seeking validation from others. We are conditioned to believe that our value is determined by how others see us. From a young age, we're taught to seek approval, to win praise, and to measure our worth by external standards. We look to others to define our success, our beauty, our intelligence, and our ability to fit in. But the pursuit of external validation, as common as it may be, is a never-ending cycle that leads to frustration, insecurity, and self-doubt. The truth is, true fulfillment and self-worth can only be found when we stop looking outside ourselves for approval and start finding validation from within. External validation is the process of seeking affirmation, praise, or recognition from others to feel good about ourselves. We may seek validation through likes on social media, compliments from friends, approval from colleagues, or acknowledgement from our families. But the problem with external validation is that it is fleeting and unreliable. It's a temporary high that quickly fades, leaving us with a sense of emptiness and the need to chase the next approval or compliment. And even when we receive validation, it doesn't necessarily reflect our true worth. It's often a reflection of someone else's perception or standards, which can be completely subjective. At its core, external validation is rooted in insecurity. When we rely on others to validate our worth, we are essentially saying that we do not trust ourselves to define our value. We are putting our emotional well-being and self-esteem in the hands of others, which can be dangerous. Other people's opinions are not always accurate or reflective of who we truly are. Their judgments may be shaped by their own biases, insecurities, or misunderstandings, and even if we do receive praise or approval, it doesn't necessarily align with our true desires or values. We can end up living our lives trying to meet the expectations of others while neglecting our own needs, aspirations, and authentic selves. One of the most important shifts we can make in our journey towards self-acceptance is to let go of the need for external validation. Instead of constantly seeking affirmation from others, we must learn to cultivate a sense of self-worth that is independent of external praise. This doesn't mean we should isolate ourselves or reject all forms of feedback. It means we should stop relying on others to determine our value. We must learn to trust ourselves and our own judgment. The key to this transformation is recognizing that our worth is not dependent on external factors or the opinions of others. Our value is inherent, and it exists simply because we exist. Letting go of external validation requires us to become more self-aware and self-accepting. It involves looking inward and recognizing that we are enough just as we are, without needing to change or prove anything to anyone. This can be a challenging shift, especially in a society that places so much emphasis on external achievements and approval. We are constantly bombarded with messages that tell us we need to look a certain way, behave a certain way, or achieve a certain level of success in order to be valuable. But when we release these external pressures and start validating ourselves from within, we begin to experience freedom from the expectations of others. One of the key components of letting go of external validation is learning to trust our own judgment. When we constantly seek approval from others, we are outsourcing our decision-making. We begin to doubt ourselves and our abilities, questioning whether we are making the right choices or doing the right things. We start to measure our actions by how others will perceive them, rather than by what feels authentic or true to us. The more we depend on others to validate our decisions, the more we lose touch with our own values and instincts. The solution is to practice making decisions based on our own inner guidance, not on what others think or expect. Trusting ourselves allows us to create a life that aligns with our true desires, rather than living in accordance with someone else's expectations. Another important aspect of letting go of external validation is building resilience to criticism. When we stop seeking validation from others, we become less vulnerable to the opinions and judgments of others. We develop the ability to hear feedback without taking it personally or letting it undermine our self-worth. Criticism is inevitable in life, but it doesn't define who we are or our abilities. We all face criticism at some point, whether it's from a colleague, a friend, or even an anonymous commenter on social media. But when we are grounded in our own sense of self-worth, we can receive feedback constructively without allowing it to shake our confidence or self-esteem. Letting go of external validation means learning to filter out what is helpful and relevant from the noise of judgment. The journey to stop seeking external validation is also about letting go of perfectionism. Many of us are perfectionists because we believe that if we are perfect, we will finally gain the validation and approval we crave. But perfectionism is a trap. It's an endless cycle of striving for an ideal that is impossible to reach. Perfection is subjective, and even when we reach what we think is perfection, it is rarely enough to satisfy our desire for validation. The pursuit of perfection only leads to stress, anxiety, and self-criticism. When we let go of the need to be perfect, we free ourselves from the constant pressure to meet external expectations. We allow ourselves to embrace our imperfections and to show up as we are, without the need for approval or recognition from others. When we stop seeking external validation, we begin to create a more authentic, fulfilling life. We stop living for the approval of others and start living for ourselves. We make choices based on what is true to our values and what brings us joy, not based on what others will think or how they will perceive us. We stop measuring our worth by the standards of others and instead measure it by our own criteria. We recognize that we are worthy of love, success, and happiness simply because we exist, not because we have earned it or because others say we have. Letting go of external validation also means learning to accept ourselves unconditionally. We are all imperfect and we all have flaws, but this does not diminish our worth. We are worthy of love and acceptance, not because we meet a certain standard, but because we are human. When we embrace our imperfections and stop seeking validation from others, we cultivate a deep sense of self-acceptance. We become more compassionate toward ourselves and others, recognizing that everyone is on their own unique journey. This self-acceptance allows us to live more authentically and to form deeper, more meaningful connections with others. In conclusion, letting go of external validation is one of the most liberating things we can do for ourselves. It allows us to step into our own power, to trust ourselves, and to live authentically. When we stop seeking approval from others, we free ourselves from the cycle of comparison and self-doubt. We recognize that our worth is not determined by others, but by who we are at our core. This shift is not easy, but it is necessary for living a life that is true to ourselves and fulfilling in every sense. Let go of the need for external validation and embrace the freedom that comes with trusting yourself and your own worth. In today's world, it's easy to mistake dependency for love or connection. We are often taught, whether through media, cultural narratives, or the way we're raised, that relationships should fill the voids within us emotionally, mentally, and even physically. But the truth is, dependency is not the same as healthy connection. While we all need relationships and human connection to thrive, it's essential to distinguish between the deep, authentic bonds that enrich our lives and the dependencies that hinder our growth. Creating meaningful connections involves cultivating relationships based on mutual respect, shared values, and understanding, while avoiding unhealthy dependencies that leave us feeling trapped, unfulfilled, or reliant on others for our sense of self-worth or happiness. To live a fulfilling life, we must stop looking to others to complete us and start seeking relationships that empower us, support our growth, and foster interdependence, where both individuals can thrive independently and together. This distinction between connection and dependency is crucial for developing relationships that are both healthy and fulfilling. Dependency, in the context of relationships, occurs when one or both parties rely heavily on the other for emotional validation, support, or a sense of self-worth. While it's natural to seek love, comfort, and companionship in others, dependency goes beyond healthy interdependence. When we become dependent on someone else for our emotional well-being, happiness, or self-esteem, we essentially give them the power to dictate our moods, our actions, and our sense of self. Over time, this can create a toxic dynamic where one person feels burdened by the weight of another's neediness, and the other feels perpetually insecure, afraid of being abandoned or rejected. This type of dependency can manifest in many ways. It might look like constantly seeking approval from others, always needing reassurance, or fearing that a relationship will end if you don't meet the other person's expectations. It can also show up as clinging to someone, whether a romantic partner, friend, or family member, because you believe you cannot survive without them or that they are the only source of validation and comfort. Dependency can feel like a deep, insatiable need that we cannot satisfy on our own, and it creates an unhealthy imbalance in relationships. The more we depend on others to fulfill our emotional needs, the less we trust ourselves and our own ability to create happiness and stability within ourselves. In contrast, creating meaningful connections involves recognizing that we are whole as individuals and that our relationships should enhance our lives, not define them. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, shared values, and the ability to support each other's growth without the expectation of fulfillment from the other person alone. When we form connections with others who respect our individuality and are capable of standing together as equals, we open ourselves to deeper, more meaningful bonds. The first step in creating meaningful connections is to learn to be content and fulfilled on our own. When we're emotionally self-sufficient, we don't look for someone else to complete us. Instead, we enter relationships with the understanding that we are already whole. We know that we bring value to the table not because of what we get from others, but because of who we are. It's essential to cultivate a sense of inner peace and self-worth so that we don't inadvertently place the weight of our happiness on the shoulders of others. This does not mean that we isolate ourselves or push others away, but rather that we prioritize our own well-being and embrace the idea of interdependence over unhealthy dependence. Interdependence, unlike dependence, is a dynamic of mutual support and shared strength. In an interdependent relationship, both people are able to thrive individually and together. They support one another's growth, respect each other's autonomy, and share their lives without placing unrealistic expectations or burdens on each other. These types of relationships are based on equality and a shared desire to nurture one another, not out of a need to fulfill unmet emotional needs or fears of abandonment. A healthy relationship thrives on balance. When we enter relationships with a sense of emotional independence, we allow space for the other person to flourish as well. We don't expect them to fulfill every emotional need we have, nor do we place all our energy into fixing their emotional state or making them happy. We understand that relationships are about partnership too, whole individuals coming together to share their lives, learn from each other, and build something meaningful together. In these connections, both people are empowered to pursue their passions, dreams, and goals while also supporting one another through challenges and growth. In contrast, dependency can create a feeling of being trapped. When we become reliant on another person for our emotional well-being, we lose our sense of autonomy. We may feel as though we can't live without that person or that our happiness depends on them. This type of dependency can also lead to unhealthy patterns of behavior, such as possessiveness, jealousy, or controlling tendencies. Dependency creates an imbalance in which one person often sacrifices their own needs for the sake of the other, resulting in a one-sided relationship that stifles growth and fulfillment. The impact of dependency extends beyond just romantic relationships. It can also affect friendships, family dynamics, and even professional relationships. For example, in friendships, dependency might look like constantly needing reassurance or approval from your friends, or being unable to make decisions without their input. In family dynamics, it might manifest as emotional over-reliance, where one family member feels responsible for the happiness of others and finds themselves drained by the constant demands. In professional settings, dependency might show up as relying on others to define your success or constantly seeking validation from colleagues or superiors. In order to create more meaningful connections, we must first be willing to address any areas of our lives where we may be fostering unhealthy dependency. This begins by examining our relationships and identifying patterns of neediness, insecurity, or fear that may be present. It involves taking responsibility for our own emotional well-being, setting healthy boundaries, and recognizing that our worth is not determined by others. By working to establish healthy, balanced relationships, we create the opportunity for genuine connection based on trust, respect, and shared values. Setting boundaries is a vital part of this process. Boundaries help protect our emotional well-being and prevent us from becoming overly reliant on others for validation. They communicate that we respect ourselves enough to preserve our own needs, desires, and feelings. By learning to set and maintain boundaries in our relationships, we allow for space to grow and thrive independently, while still being able to offer love, support, and connection to others in healthy ways. Boundaries help prevent emotional burnout, resentment, and the feeling of being overwhelmed by another person's needs. Creating meaningful connections also requires open communication. Being able to express our feelings, needs, and concerns in a respectful and honest way is essential for building strong, healthy relationships. When we communicate openly, we allow for greater understanding and compassion between ourselves and others. This transparency helps foster deeper connections and ensures that both people's needs are being met without the need for codependency. In conclusion, creating meaningful connections is about cultivating relationships that support mutual growth, respect, and understanding. It is about recognizing that we are already whole as individuals and that the connections we form with others should enhance, not complete us. By letting go of dependency and embracing interdependence, we create space for authentic love and connection to flourish. In these relationships, both people are free to thrive independently and together, building a foundation of trust, respect, and shared strength. Meaningful connections are not about filling voids, they are about celebrating each other's unique strengths and supporting each other through life's journey. In conclusion, the journey toward building healthy, meaningful connections is one of the most important endeavors we can undertake in our lives. It requires us to let go of dependency and embrace the empowering concept of interdependence, where we rely on ourselves for emotional fulfillment while sharing our lives with others in a balanced, respectful, and supportive way. By recognizing that our value does not come from the approval or validation of others, but from within, we open the door to deeper, more authentic relationships. We no longer need to search for love to complete us because we understand that we are already whole. Creating meaningful connections is not about seeking validation or relying on others to meet every emotional need. It's about being self-sufficient, establishing healthy boundaries, and fostering relationships built on trust, mutual respect, and shared growth. When we let go of the illusion that others are responsible for our happiness or self-worth, we create space for true connection. These connections allow us to support one another's growth and flourish as individuals while deepening our bond with others. By focusing on interdependence rather than dependency, we can build relationships that are fulfilling, empowering, and rooted in the authenticity of who we truly are. Ultimately, the most meaningful connections are the ones where we are free to be ourselves, where we come together not to fill voids, but to share in the richness of life. When we focus on creating these kinds of bonds, we cultivate a sense of belonging that enriches our lives, nourishes our well-being, and supports our continued growth as individuals. Healthy, meaningful relationships are not about perfection, they are about authenticity, mutual respect, and the deep understanding that love is not about completion, but about coming together to create something more beautiful than we could ever achieve alone.